Hi, and welcome to Untethered with Jen List, the podcast that's here to help you free yourself from the crap that's holding you back so you can claim the life you're meant to live. I'm your host, Jen, and in this episode, we are going to talk about how to go from busy to balanced. Let's go. Hi, it's Jen. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we have Charis Santillie on the podcast. Charis is a life balance coach who helps high achievers go from busy to balanced. She is just a spectacular person, and I didn't even realize the depth of the connection that we had with each other until she was coming on the podcast. So you'll hear this in the interview, but Charis and I met through Speaker Slam. We both were competing in the speaking competition last year, and hilariously, we both remembered each other's speeches the most. Of anybody who spoke, I remember hers, the message. I remember messaging her that night after her speech and just being like, I felt your speech in my gut. And it's because of what she shares in this interview where she talks about us bracing for impact. And it's so interesting. I just have to give a little bit of insight into myself. She talks about the way that we brace within our bodies, inside of our bodies, all day, every day, as high achievers who are out there trying to take care of everything and keep things going and keep things moving and get it all done. We're just bracing for something bad to potentially happen. And I feel like that's how I lived so much of my life. And my muscles, y'all, have always been so dang tense and tight. And I have learned through breath work and through some of the things that I have done in the past few years that I literally have been bracing for impact. I've been bracing my body. And so my body is so tense. Well, it's not as tense anymore, actually, but massage therapists, everybody would say this to me, why are your muscles so tight? I even remember Googling, why are my muscles so tight? What's wrong with me? I thought maybe I have a salt imbalance. Anyway, I have to share that because of what she ends up sharing in this episode and why mindfulness and the science behind actually supporting ourselves and shifting the way that we think can help our physical body. So we talk about mind, we talk about body, we talk about spirit. I just know that you're going to absolutely love her and just really be impacted, pun totally intended there, by her message. So everyone, welcome to the podcast, Charis. Hi, Charis.
Hi. Good to be here, Jen.
I'm genuinely so thrilled about this because we connected via Speaker Slam, and a lot of listeners to this podcast have been along that Speaker Slam journey with me last year, where ended up going to Toronto and doing a speech on stage. And I met you through that process. And actually, your story of all of the speakers who went along that journey for me was the most memorable. Genuinely, I actually, besides my own, don't remember anybody else's speech to the degree that I remember yours. Your stories just show so powerful, and I'm thrilled for you to share it with the audience. But first, would love to hear, why are you excited to come and speak today about who you are and what you do? What gets you so passionate and jazzed about the topic that you speak about?
Well, first of all, I love talking to people that have an awesome vibe. I've turned down certain podcasts or not pitched to certain people on purpose for certain reasons, because it's important to me that I connect with someone as much as I can, and likewise yours. I honestly can't remember. I don't think I can remember any others. In fact, I have to tell you, the night that we did the speeches in the whatever round we were in together, my dad and I talked right after, and he said, the only other one that I'd consider is that cute girl. And he said, with the purple hair.
That's hilarious. He didn't mention the bathtub, the fact that the whole speech was about some dude in a bathtub.
I think he went with whatever the hair color was at the moment, but it was really cute. He said she was super, and I agreed with him. So just so you know, you made an impact on us as well.
I love that because he's the star of your story too.
Yes, he is. So that'll come into play. The audience will come to understand that in a moment. So connecting and having conversations like this is just so much fun for me. And so I was really excited, and I knew we would do this someday. So it was something I really looked forward to, and thanks for making it happen now. But that connection, and then being able to help other people, because I know that that's ultimately what you and I are passionate about. And along the journey, helping ourselves. I mean, I have to be honest and admit that part of the reason I do this is selfish, like for me to continue to heal. I'll just be straight up and admit it, because every time I tell my story, every time I talk about these principles, every time I teach, every time I record a video, whatever I'm doing, it reinforces to me the work I'm doing, because I'm still doing all of this freaking work for sure, but I've come far enough that I have enough to teach and to offer to others, because I have progressed and I have learned, and I certainly am better than I used to be. But I have to admit, that's another big benefit, big bonus of doing this work, especially if, like me, I focus on an area that is my biggest area and something that I'm continuing to work on.
Yeah. Thank you. First of all, you're a perfect guest for this podcast. I know my listeners are like, yes, because we just love realness, authenticity, just telling it like it is. And it's so beautiful that you're willing to be that honest and forthright about it, that, hey, I'm helping myself too. It's someone was just on the podcast a couple weeks ago, Pascal, who talked about this same thing. She's like, we need to be selfish, and we can also be gaining something while we're giving. And listeners of this podcast too are givers or servers who have creative gifts that they really want to offer to other people. It's so important that we also understand how to receive in return. And you're doing that by just showing up fully as yourself. And I just think it's so, so beautiful. So noted and appreciated. And so what is it that you teach before we dive into how you got to this point? Like, what is it that you teach? What are you really passionate about?
I help high achievers go from busy to balanced. And so I'm a life balance coach. My actual certification is that I'm a certified fearless living coach. I'm also a certified fearless trainer and a positive intelligence trainer. But I've just summarized that with life balance coach, because that's really my area of focus. And for me too, and if we want to talk about this later, we can as well. Balance, it's really about, in a nutshell, I'll just share this now, internal balance, like actually feeling somewhat balanced. It's how you feel. It's not about the time. It's not about the perfect equation of your life, because I used to try to, I was convinced I could figure that out years ago. If I do this many days a week and this many hours, then everything will be perfect. Yeah, no, that didn't work. So it's all about really how you're feeling, and are you feeling balanced? And then also, my balance is going to be different than your balance. And my balance today is going to be different than yesterday or next week or next year. So it's getting to know what that actually even means for each person, how it feels, and then all the tools and strategies to find it, recalibrate to get there consistently, kind of that fluidity that needs to be applied to life on a day-to-day basis, sometimes hour to hour, minute to minute, to be able to feel better. And that's ultimately what I want for everybody. I didn't want everybody to feel better more of the days.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And it's cool that you're certified in helping people with fear, because that is such a huge thing that really holds us back, and love this idea of that internal balance. So have you lived much of your life feeling unbalanced? It sounds like you were trying to make that equation work. Was it because you yourself were feeling unbalanced? Take us through that process that has led you to now.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably a good time to go into the story, because that'll lead right into this. So I like to say I was born with ambition. I mean, I literally was born into an entrepreneurial household. There was one year, I think my dad took home 12 W-2s. I mean, because he was trying to find his thing. And then he decided, okay, I'm just going to do my own thing. And then he tried some different businesses, and then something really stuck. And my parents created this business out of our kitchen and grew it. And I grew up in that environment, watching them grow this business from literally out of our kitchen, a gourmet pasta business, to this big company with a lot of employees and saw them get awards and all sorts of cool accolades for all that hard work. And I saw them work really hard. And then I modeled after that. I went for all the big achievements that I could as a child, the valedictorian, the class president, the most likely to succeed, all the accolades that I could get. And I enjoyed myself, and it wasn't, but I definitely put a lot of pressure on myself and modeled after what I was seeing around me too. But everything was really quite, I think, pretty idealistic, my memory of my childhood. And so it really was beautiful. And we were a hardworking family going after the American dream and achieving a lot of cool things. And then the summer after my freshman year of college, I came home and visited, and it was my dad's 50th birthday. And so we were celebrating with a hot air balloon ride. And I grew up in Washington State. This was 1994, to kind of give reference here. I'm in my late 40s. And it was the summer I was turning 19 and he was turning 50. So we went for this beautiful ride, super hot day. It was like 107 degrees there in southeastern Washington State. And we almost didn't go up, but we did. And we had this really beautiful ride, hot, but beautiful. But when we came down, something went terribly wrong. And when we came into land, the basket bounced. And my dad was thrown out, and his foot got wrapped around a cord, and he was dragged about the length of a football field through farm fields and lifted upside down, hanging upside down. I still can remember looking over the edge of the basket and seeing him dangling there. And then I was in complete hysterics. It was absolutely terrifying. And all I remember is just screaming. Somehow, I don't know how, but we did land. And then we were racing over to him, and he was face down and not moving, but he was conscious. And so my sister-in-law's a nurse. And so the adults, I basically was still in the typical kind of child reaction zone, I would say, of just complete freak out at that. Everybody else was calm. How old were you again at the time? I was about to turn 19.
Okay.
So kind of, everybody else was kind of immediately calm, problem solving, and just evaluating. So we ran over to him. They were able to turn him over carefully, and he was conscious, and he saw me, complete hysterical wreck. And he looked at me and he said, "You should see the other guy." So he was able to crack a joke. And he suffered a broken neck, was paralyzed. And my world just, actually, to relate to your question too, and the life balance, it really, that night, I got myself emotionally more grounded and centered, and, the hysterical crying stopped at some point that evening. And I then saw people around me then I saw my family kind of starting to fall apart a little bit, and saw my mom looking very distraught. And I thought, well, maybe what can I do to help? So I just started doing all the phone calls to all the staff and family and all that sort of thing. So I got busy, head down, get busy, take care of business. Oh, this feels good. I'm in control of this. This I can manage. So that was a pivotal point for me, that where already being a, responsible young woman and ambitious and all these things, but it was like, then that became ultra safe zone, because it felt like I had control, and it was a way to kind of bypass / set aside or ignore feelings. Mm-hmm. And it was easy to excuse because I was doing helpful stuff. That, I think, was a huge pivotal moment for literally what has taken me years to, and I'm still doing some of this rewiring. But at that moment, I think my brain literally clicked into and created a very clear path of, this is a good place to be. Let's keep doing this. And then it just, became like that super highway of, this is a really great way to act in life. And that became a pattern, big pattern. My mom, her coping mechanism became alcohol. So she became an alcoholic, and we ended up losing her about 10 years ago, and coming up on the 10th anniversary this Thanksgiving, actually. So that was about a 20-year battle with alcohol that she had, and her coping mechanism for avoiding her feelings and the challenges that came. My parents ended up losing their business. They lost their house. I mean, it was just one thing after another. So it was a significant crumbling of kind of this picture perfect family, and story at the time, to a whole new story. So that is in a nutshell, what happened. And so now, for the audience, if you can imagine, I did a 5-minute speech, inspirational speech about this. I talked about my journey becoming a coach, and how I spent the last decade really peeling back all of my layers and really healing in all sorts of ways. And the last line of my speech was that we can all, because I talked about bracing for impact in the crash landing, and how my body literally went for years trying to brace for impact and protect me, literally with neck tension, back tension, to just the attitude and way in which I would live and exist in the world. So my closing line was that we can all stop bracing for impact, because we all have our ways we do that, and start making an impact, which is what I've been doing. So then Dad listened that night, and the whole speech experience was also really special for he and I, because there was some details in the speech that I put that he didn't ever remember hearing about the accident and the aftermath and certain things that happened that day and night. And it was a big cathartic experience for us and then for me to rehearse it, that was like 30 therapy sessions in like a week or two.
So true. So true. Same experience with writing a speech.
Yeah. Therapy and then I went a little overboard the night of the final round that I was in, that I thought, God, I'm not being emotional enough. So then I grabbed a picture of my dying mother, like when she was on her deathbed, and put it up on my screen. But then it took me too far in the final one. And then I also had a computer glitch because I wanted to have a recording of it. And then I didn't realize it was causing a hiccup with it. So a couple interesting things of that night. But if you'd seen my view, I had a picture of my parents in one of my favorite photos of them when they were like in their prime, like a year or two before the accident. And then I had a picture of my mom smiling at me when she was on her deathbed and very, very weak and not looking so great, but her light shining through. But yeah, I think I went a little overboard that night, because then I think I was a little extra choked up trying to tell the speech.
That reminds me of Ted Lasso. I don't know if you've seen the season finale of Ted Lasso, but there's actually like a moment of like over emotion can sometimes like go the other direction. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not that it was hard for me to be emotional. It was just, I wanted, after you rehearse something so many times, it can be. So anyway, little side story, but point being, it was very cathartic, because I really was over and over practice, like in my mind, going there and remembering what it was like. And my dad was actually coaching me through that process, because the first time I shared it with him, my first draft, he was like, you're not there. You got to you're going to have to go there and feel this.
But you're bracing for impact even with your own speech, yes. Huh?
Totally protecting myself. So then I unleashed, and then, had us go multiple rounds in tears together. And that was really the best part of the whole experience, was a different reconnecting with him and a healing that we both went through over at that time. So he watched the live around with us. And so now the audience will get the full picture.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing not just the story, but also these little anecdotes, and just so genuinely the things that you gained along the way. Because one of the things that I think is so important that we often undervalue or don't consider is the feedback that we get for ourselves, or the experiences that we get for ourselves along the way of doing a brave or courageous thing. And you stepping out and putting this speech together was brave on so many levels. And look at what you gained in your own life with your own father through doing it. That's so beautiful. I also want to go back. First of all, I'm so sorry to hear about your mother and the experience and just, I mean, everything that you went through. That's just the fact that you are the person who you are today speaks so many volumes of you. And not just that you went through that experience and came out on the other side as a whole and complete human, but that you have been able to turn inward on everything that happened to you through that experience and begin to pick it through. That is not easy. And now you get to, you're using that to help other people. Like, it's just beautiful. It's beautiful that this is the life that you're living.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And I switched gears. I actually was on a different track. I was out of college. I worked for someone else for a little while. And then I started as a graphic designer, as a freelancer. And then I got into marketing. And then I had my own marketing business, specifically for orthodontists, because my husband's an orthodontist. And then I developed software in that world too. And then a few years ago, I was like, I needed the full switch, and was able to make a full shift. So
that's also so great to hear too, because it's like, I was a hairstylist and then I actually went into marketing copywriting, not graphic design. And then I have transitioned into the coaching world too. And I think it's so helpful to hear the journey that somebody has been on that has taken them to where they are, because it's your work experience and your lived experience, all of it together, that has created the amazing coach who you are and the person who has all of these gifts to offer that you're now packaging and offering in a whole new way. So let's talk, if we can dig in a little bit on this bracing for impact thing, because one of the things for me in my journey, and I know that this is the truth for so many people, is that shutdown of emotion, the emotional shutdown that we do, that it sounds like was also your experience too. Why do you think that happens? And why should we get out of it? Because in some ways, it was easier to live in the shutdown than it was to start to feel.
Oh, I think it's still, I look back and still have moments even today where I'm like, I think that was easier even than today. And I have a crap load of tools in my pocket and all sorts of resources that I can, that I utilize regularly. I still think it was easier. And yet, do I want to go back there? Would I, if I could wave a little magic wand? Heck no. No, because it's so much better being, I think this word's been over or gotten a bad rap in recent days and years, but I don't know what other way to say it, being awake. I think it is just so much better being awake and being well. And I think that we're supposed to feel our feelings. I don't know, you and I haven't had a conversation about spiritual beliefs, but I believe that we're coming here to have a whole experience. We're supposed to feel it. And we're supposed to also sort out along the way how to feel good the most, because we're supposed to have more joy in this whole journey than most of us have or permit ourselves to have because of all the challenges of being a human. But I think that is ultimately what we're supposed to be doing, is connecting with love and joy and compassion.
We're fully aligned there. I too believe that we are here to feel, to have an experience, and to transmute that energy more into joy, and that we're light beings who are here to make everything better and to have just a magical experience. I probably overuse the word magic and glitter and joy, but I truly believe it. And if we don't feel, if we stay numbed out through our entire lives, then we are denying our soul. We are denying other souls the opportunity to have that experience.
And I love you just use the word transmute. I literally used that this week in my podcast episode. And I think you lead breath work is one of the things you do, right?
Right.
So I did my first ever breath work session a few weeks ago, actually, with someone. And I shared about this experience because the title literally is How Breath Work Transmuted an Old, I don't remember what the rest of it is now, but it transmuted as something that was holding me back. And the very short story of that is that years ago, someone told me, basically, Charis, everything you touch turns to gold. And that to me came up in the breathwork session in my thoughts. And then it was near the end, it was replaced with you are the gold.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Because with everything I already shared and we talked about that sentence of you turn everything to gold. I mean, it's a lot of pressure, and it kind of is a perfect summary of how I lived a lot of my life, is kind of feeling that was an expectation of, that I needed to do. And then if I couldn't do that, well, then I suck. So, figuring that out along the way. But what came up was there was another layer, and that comment, that memory was still haunting me, deep, deep, deep down. So it came up out of the blue in this, and then it flipped. And then I saw a visual of a big safe, and then like gold bars in the safe. And then I saw them kind of melt, like coming out of the safe. And I was like, oh, that's beautiful. So kind of like when you mentioned this ties back into the emotions, and what you just mentioned too, is picturing that we have a safe inside of us. And if we lock all those feelings and that stuff and our gifts and whatever aspects we lock away, definitely the feelings, but to be able to unlock that, and then also to let it move and let it flow. Like, it doesn't need to stay rigid. We don't need to be rigid. We can't. So there was like so many things that came up in that, which I wanted to share with you, because I know that this is a thing of an area you focus in. So that just happened. It was quite remarkable. And there's my transmuted story that literally was this week.
Yeah, breathwork can bring up. So some people have a lot of visuals, other people don't. It just totally depends on the person. But we can have experiences like thoughts and things that's much like hypnosis, meditation. I mean, breathwork often is a form of meditation. You get to a meditative state, and it allows things to arise from your subconscious that you can see. And when you're in that calm state, you're out of the fight or flight. And so then you were able to see it with some spaciousness and able to then put new meaning. Like, you had that old meaning attached to it that you no longer wanted, that was like still like cycling in you and probably creating negative emotions and like wrapped up in this thing. And you were able to transmute it into joy, which is what, if you believe this on a spiritual level, like that's what we're here to do, is transmute things like that into a more joyous state. So, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And it's just such a cool story for people who are listening, who might be feeling those expectations of, I need to be the person who does this. I need to be the person who is turning things into gold. I need to be the person who is standing, taking care of all the phone calls and doing all the things for all the people. So if somebody feels like they're that person, but then they also hear this message from us of, it's going to be really hard when you start to feel, why should they begin to feel? Like, what is for them on the other side?
Let's fix that. Yeah. So one of my least favorite words is hard, because it just can put up so many blocks for us. So, but I think what it is if I look back, the way I was living before was, it's not that I didn't have any joy or any happiness. I mean, people, and especially people on the outside, would have been like, oh yeah, she's got it all. But I didn't feel complete. And I would be just head down. And I mean, my husband would often seem puzzled, like, how did I not notice the dishwasher was full? Or, just random stuff.
Sounds like me. I relate so much.
That it's like, do you not see these things? Because in one way it could be misperceived as if I'm leaving these things for him to do, but it really wasn't. And, so earlier on in our marriage, at some point we're coming up on our 25th wedding anniversary, actually, this summer.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I remember needing to explain to him and show him, and then he saw proof. I was just oblivious because I was so focused on work, more work, gotta get this done, gotta achieve this. I mean, I even felt inconvenienced if I had to make a medical appointment or a this or a that. It was like, oh, I'll do that in like 6 months. I'll have more time then. Or, that kind of feeling. It was easy. And so I do feel that there was like some blinders on in my life, much more so than now. And I mean, I can still get in a zone and kind of be like, to be quite honest, sometimes irritated if I'm like into my thing and then it's like, come spend time with me, come look at the beautiful sunset. I still have moments where it's that old pattern that's just gotten hooked in. And then I'm like, I catch myself and I'm like, no, this is like the really good, juicy stuff of life. Put the freaking laptop down, go look at the beautiful sunset with your husband, but I was just so oblivious before, or I couldn't make that shift in my head. Like I said, I can't help but, well, and personally, it drives me bonkers when coaches and people out there where it appears that they have all their stuff figured out in the area that they teach too, because we know that that's a bunch of BS. So I just like to admit that I still have this stuff that comes up for myself too, but it would take me over before. Now I catch it and I'm like, oh, look, isn't that interesting? And then okay, set it down, notice the feelings and then move on. But I just think that it makes for such a richer life because I think I missed out on a lot of things. I mean, there was years that went by that I didn't take our prior dog on walks that I think I would have had I been more alert and awake, but it was easy because she was an indoor dog. She was indoor trained. It was, we would go on some walks, but I mean, there was just, if I look back, I would have lived differently. Now, do I have necessarily regrets? I don't want to say that I do necessarily, because I think this has all been part of the process to get me here. And I don't like to look at things that way. Do I have feelings sometimes of regret? Yeah, of course. But in general, if I can really be in my centered place and evaluate my life, do I have any true regrets? Not really, because I think it all was part of the whole thing to get me here. But I think that it's important I like the analogy of like a garden, the weeding or things get messier before they get clean. You have to, dig in the dirt. Or if you think about a closet that you haven't cleaned out in a while and it's really messy, like you have to dump everything out. It gets a little messier before you get it all tidy again. That's how I look at the being more in touch with your feelings and facing them. And it can feel like it gets messier for a while because having more awareness, it's like someone just totally changed the filter, the lens on your glasses, or upped the prescription. And you were like, whoa, I was missing all of this. So I think that it can feel like it gets messier, but the truth is you're just finally seeing the truth. The truth is you're finally seeing the truth. And that, I mean, I don't want to live a life where I'm not seeing and feeling the truth, even if some of it feels kind of crappy along the way. I think that just, and it also has allowed me to make these decisions to make myself happier, like to get out of certain things, to move along from my prior business, to get into this now, which lights me up. So I think that's another key piece, is that it creates, when you can really know how you feel, it's hard to keep doing things. That's where the hard comes in. It's hard to stay doing things that aren't bringing you any joy or happiness. Really, that's where the hard stuff comes in, because you're like, this feels like torture and you're aware of it finally. And then, and then you have to pay attention to that. And you're like, okay, I don't want to feel this way anymore. And you have to actually choose something that's going to make you happier. And then when you do, then you're like, God, this is so much more fun to live this way.
Yeah, going on the dog walks. I mean, once you let yourself do it. And thank you for sharing you are like a breath of fresh air, or like the song that we all didn't know that we needed. Like the first time you heard Adele and you're like, I had no idea that my life was lacking until I just heard this like truth sung into my soul. So thank you so much for just being, I think this is the third time in this interview that I've thanked you for being so authentic, but it's so true. Even what you just said about coaches, like stop glossing over it. A lot of us are wounded healers. Like the wound is actually your greatest gift, and that's okay. And it's okay for us to speak about it authentically while still being confident that we can help other people and fully recognize the mess that we've been through. Because it's like, I love your garden analogy. What also came to mind for me was like, when you cook a really good meal, you make a freaking mess, but you've got to be willing to just like get all the ingredients out so that you can make this really spectacular thing. And that's what you're really doing. I mean, sure, you can just keep using American cheese and a hot dog and a bun and eating that, or you can get in there and make something awesome.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Yeah. Do you want that amazing meal? Do you want those beautiful flowers, trees, or not?
Yeah, that's okay. So I'm so curious. This podcast is called Untethered, and it's my belief that so many of us have tethers that we don't even realize that we have that are keeping us in place. And we have carefully crafted these tethers. I mean, many of yours, I often think about balloons. So it's kind of funny. I often think like you are a hot air balloon that is like setting into the sky, but you're like stuck. So I hope it's okay if I use that metaphor, even though your story is balloon related. But what have been your biggest tethers for you personally?
No, it's a great visual. And yeah, it doesn't bother me. 20 years ago, it may have, but I've moved beyond. There was a time when I couldn't even see them. I would drive by and it was but I'm not that like that anymore. I can see the beauty in the photos and things when I see them. In fact, I found when my mom had passed and I was going through a bunch of my parents' things, she had a broken, it just needed a slight glue repair, but a crystal, like I collected crystal figurines when I was a kid, and I didn't remember this one, but she had it in a basket and it was slightly broken, but again, it could just be glued. So I did. And I have it in my curio cabinet now with all the other crystals. It's of a hot air balloon and a little bear in the basket. So yeah, it's come, so I'm able to even have that, have a beauty of something like that in my world. But now I forgot the question you asked because I got sidetracked.
I'm curious about your tethers, or what even just with your clients, like your clients, like what are some of the biggest tethers that have held you back that you also see holding other people back?
I think as high achievers, so me and my clients, and it sounds like you identify the same. We have serious ambition, and yet it can carry us away sometimes. The thing is, it's not bad, but I think it's one of those, like, we can take it too far. We can go two ways. We can either be like blaming ourselves for the fact that have guilt connected with having ambition in the first place, or we can also, well, actually, I think guilt is actually one of the tethers. Guilt for having ambition in the first place, guilt for thinking about work and our ambition when we're with our family and doing other things, guilt for when we're with our family and then when we're working and we're feeling like we should be spending more time with our family. Like I think guilt is a common one. And I think perfectionism. I did an interview with my own coach actually a month or so ago, and we told the story of how we met. And the first thing out of her mouth was, "You were a recovering perfectionist." And she says, and I think hiring me was kind of at the beginning, like checking something off your list. Rhonda can help me. Check.
Love it.
So I think perfectionism and guilt are two of the common ones in my world.
How do you untether from them?
There's a big factor of permission and learning certain skills and tools that they're not necessarily challenging, but just practicing certain things to be able to flip the switch. So if I have a moment of guilt, it doesn't carry, I can recognize it and I can acknowledge it, and there's certain things I can think about or do to kind of switch that feeling a little bit so it doesn't carry me away, and then it doesn't carry on for my day or my weeks or whatever. And then perfectionism. For me, I embrace the phrase good enough.
Love that.
Good enough. So that, and then, and learning different concepts over time and practicing them. In Fearless Living, we talk about perfection or connection. Which one do you want to have? So there's another phrase about perfection, and I can't think of what it is from the 12-step program. I can't think of it right now, a common one. But then Rhonda's variation was perfection or connection.
Love that.
And, I want to have connection. I want to have connection with myself. I want to have connection with people around me. So again, I may have just a moment of a feeling or something, and then I can kind of self-correct.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most valuable things that I do and that I teach actually is from positive intelligence. And it's all of my frameworks are based in neuroscience, but on the surface, the way we think about them, they're simple. And so simple a practice of mindfulness moments. Like meditation is great. I highly recommend it, but I've only recently in recent months been able to do it consistently multiple days per week. But this is something that I was able to implement easier. And this helps throughout the day, is to just practice on one sense, a focus on one sense, literally sight, sound, hearing, taste or smell. But typically for me, sight, like if I've looked over here at all during the interview, it's because my window's right there and I have trees and birds and, beautiful outside, but looking and focusing and looking at the birds bounce around or looking at the colors of the green and the leaves, but just so focused, really, really mindful of that moment. Or listening, for me, listening to the birds outside is a big one that can just help drop me in, take me away from the perfection, away from the guilt, away from the fear, away from whatever the feelings are that could sweep me away. Sense of touch. You can rub two fingers together so you feel your
just
shut your eyes.
it.
What?
I was just doing it because I've studied positive intelligence
You
too.
have
And
to?
I was like, oh, the finger touch. Yes. That's I was hilariously doing it while you said that.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So have you talked about this with your audience? Do they know
I
what
have
you're talking
not.
about?
No, I've never talked about it. I've studied it and I do it sometimes, but I have not. I love that you're bringing this up.
Okay.
Powerful
So we'll
stuff.
tell them what this is. So basically it helps if you're doing this. Sometimes you can kind of pull in a couple things together, but if you're doing this at the initial onset, it's simple to just focus on one thing at a time. So if it's not sight, then you shut your eyes and you rub two fingers together and be so focused that you feel your fingerprints and you feel the ridges. And that's all. You're not like, you're just trying to be so focused that you can feel that detail. Or I like the one too, where you can take one hand down the other and feel the joints. And then if you're wearing a ring, you'll feel that. And you can go all the way down. And it kind of just feels soothing and like yummy and kind of tingly too, to go all the way down to my wrist. So that's an example of touch. Or literally feel your butt in your chair or your feet on the floor. But any of these things can be done. Like if you're I know one of my clients used one of these for when she was in a dental appointment that was super uncomfortable. Or I, really focused on like the ceiling tile at an appointment and, really just looking at the lines and the shapes. But the whole point is that what that does is it brings in your whole brain, accesses a whole aspect of your brain. If you want to talk about it in very general terms, their whole right side of the brain that typically we kind of like have a little bit, I don't want to say offline. It's not technically offline, but we really are left brain dominant, which is analytical, logical, dividing things out, making sense of things, having explanations and reasons for everything. And oh, by the way, the big fear center that has not evolved past. I mean, it is not matured. It does not mature with us. And it has not matured in millennia in the fact that it still thinks that if I'm nervous because I saw an email, that it might kill me like a bear maybe would have killed me 100 years ago or whatever. So what this is doing in very simple terms is it's just bringing your whole brain online and kind of less focus on that left side that's trying to make sense out of everything, put things in boxes and think that everything's going to kill you. So that's at least the way I kind of think about it and talk about it a bit. So focusing on one sense and doing that, even just for 20 seconds, can switch things enough to not have you have the momentum that can carry you away with the uncomfortable stuff. And it's not that we should avoid the uncomfortable stuff. I mean, I'll do EFT tapping on myself.
We have talked about that on the podcast. Okay. Yes.
I'll do, breathing, focus on my breath. I'll do all sorts of things and I'll just let myself cry, say stuff, whatever I need to do. And yet there's a lot of times when we can just switch it, and it may not need to go all the way there, or it may not be appropriate in the circumstance. Like you need to maybe you're around too many people, and you're like, oh, this is not the place to like unleash the tears that are building up right now. So let me do a couple PQ reps, which means just focusing on any one of your senses for a little bit and kind of settle my system. So
yeah, thank you for sharing these very real, very effective tools. And just to even reflect on what was happening as you began to talk about positive intelligence, my brain started doing the finger rub because it really is a supportive practice to me. And I frequently do it when I get overwhelmed. That is my go-to, because I found when I did that program, it was the thing that really, really stuck with me. And so you can find the thing that for you, and then it becomes automatic. You don't have to think, oh, I should rub two fingers together. I was just doing it. And I didn't even realize I was doing it until you started to talk about it. And I was like, oh, my two fingers are literally rubbing, and it's helping me focus on what Charis is saying in this interview right now so that I can be present with you and not become overwhelmed by, oh, we've only got 5 minutes left in this and all the things. It helps bring me back to the present moment instead of ruminating on whatever your mind, because that's what our minds like to do, especially if you have been an overachiever and you've been a doer and you've been that, like you're that side of your brain. It's good. It doesn't need any more PQ reps. Like get some reps to the other side.
Yeah, it's super strong. It is robust. It is like a little, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So this has been such a good interview. Thank you for sharing everything that you have. I have one last question that I ask every single person. Charis, where do you see the magic in the world?
Oh, I have very, very close, dear friend of mine who's really more like family. She told me once to find the magic in the moments. So that is something that I practice doing. And I think that's where it's to be found. I think it's everywhere. And so it's in the moments. I mean, and to be quite honest, even the moments that you could easily label as being scary or sad or whatever you want to call them, quote unquote, something negative. But there is often some sort of magic in there. I mean, look at even the hot air balloon accident. Do I wish it happened? No. I mean, I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. And yet there is magic in there of what it's led to. Like with me and my course and what I'm doing now, my journey. And I also, I mean, spiritually, I just yesterday interviewed neurosurgeon, Dr. Eben Alexander, New York Times bestselling author of Proof of Heaven. And I read his other latest book too, Living in a Mindful Universe. Anyway, it's just fascinating. The more I learn, the more I do believe, because there is a huge pile of scientific data that is coming out, that I think is being more openly talked about now, but it's been around for a while, about reincarnation, about us choosing things in our spiritual lives. So I can't help but wonder, well, then there's and practice believing that there really is magic in everything then, especially when I'm seeing proof supporting some things that I've been exploring and curious about for a while. So yeah, there's magic in the moments.
It's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I love your mix of spirituality and science. It's really refreshing to me when somebody is able to combine those in a way that it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, or at least it makes sense for you. And so I'm open to listening to the way that you share it. So, okay, where can people find you? Where can they connect with you, work with you if they so desire?
Well, if you're listening to this podcast, then maybe you want to check out my podcast. It's called Charis Your Life. And my name is a tricky one, I know, but it's basically, you pronounce and spell it just like the city Paris, but with a CH, CHARIS. So Charis Your Life is the name of the podcast. It's also my website. And yeah, little fun, little play on words there. And then I have a free video training if you want to go check out, that you can get at charisyourlife.com/video.
Hey, we'll put all your links in the show notes as well.
Great.
Beautiful. Thank you, Charis, so much for coming on and sharing everything that you shared. I meant to tell you, I got goosebumps twice during this interview. So lots of truth bombs. Appreciate it.
Oh, this was so much fun. It really, really, really was. And to hear all these other things that we have in common, that's even the best part.
I hope you enjoyed everything that Charis had to say today and that you had some really powerful takeaways for yourself. I'd love to just share a couple of things that I jotted down for myself, where Charis talked about just, are you balanced on the inside emotionally? Or are you really focusing so heavily on getting things done and ignoring the internal world, ignoring your emotions, ignoring your feelings? Are you living one-sided? Another thing that she talked about is these tethers of guilt and even like guilt around being so ambitious. A lot of high achievers, it's like you feel guilty for not getting it all done, but then you feel guilty for being so busy and working so much that then you're just living in this whole world of guilt. This was me, so I can feel that so deeply. And also perfectionism. I loved her note about it's good enough. It's good enough. It's great. Like, don't let perfection be the enemy of good or even the enemy of great. So often we just don't get things done because we're trying to make them perfect. And she also talked so deeply about that all of these frameworks that she teaches are based in neuroscience. It's not just a bunch of woo-woo fluff. And even there's so much science being done. And I'm so curious to interview more and more people who talk about this. There's so much science. There's so much connection being made in the scientific community around spiritual principles and the things that we have done throughout the millennia as human beings that have supported our minds through our beliefs in the spirit and the actions that we would take in our spiritual practices. So curious to continue diving into this. Thank you so much to Charis for coming on the podcast and sharing all of this with us today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you took something really awesome away from yourself out of this episode. If you did, I encourage you to take a little screenshot of this episode, artwork, and then share it on social media. And you can share a link to jenlist.com/podcast. I will always, if you tag me at untetheredjen on Instagram, I will share your post. If you haven't yet left a review of this podcast, Untethered with Jen List, I would so appreciate it. You can leave reviews on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. It really helps get this podcast into more ears. Thank you again so much. It means the world to me that you'd listen. You just keep shining your magical unicorn light out there for all to see. I'll see you next time.